Well, just when we thought the hoax had been laid to rest, here it comes again. In no less form and on no less platform than an encyclical from Pope Francis. An encyclical is to come out this coming Thursday, in which the Pope will attack the subject of global warming. Now they're naming it climate change. That's what all of the global warmist people have done since it didn't happen. Now they're moving to climate change. But since we've had no global warming, zero, in the last 18 years, why now? Why is the Pope beating the drum for global warming? I mean, we haven't even heard Al Gore say anything about it lately, and he was the champion of global warming because, frankly, well, the evidence all just melted down into one big snowball. I mean, we've had cooler winters the last several winters than we've had in a long, long time. I think the bigger question to ask today is, what is behind the contention that global warming is in fact happening? Let me give you a little bit of what happened back in 2008. There was a special by ABC News. It went something like this. New York City underwater, gas over $9 a gallon, a carton of milk cost almost $13. Welcome to June the 12th, 2015. By the way, that was last Friday. But nevertheless, that's what they said back in 2008. Welcome to June the 12th, 2015. Or at least that was the wildly inaccurate version of 2015 predicted by ABC News exactly 7 years ago. Okay, on June the 13th, 2008, abcnews.com promoted the special. They were producing a special on global warming by hyperventilating. Are we living in the last century of our civilization? Unlike the 2015 predictions, that suggestion hasn't happened yet and hasn't been proven wrong either. 7 years later, that's now, the network has quietly ignored its horribly inaccurate predictions about 2015. When it comes to global warming claims, well, apparently results don't matter for ABC. Now, if Endtime Ministries made an outlandish, horribly off-base, totally errant statement like this, we would be absolutely inundated with all kinds of letters and accusations. The web would be absolutely swarming with ridicule. Yet we've got Al Gore, who said a few years ago that by 2030, sea levels would rise by 18 feet. I mean, he made this speech, I believe it was at the United Nations. Or if it was not at the United Nations, it was at the Global Warming Conference in Copenhagen. And that would have been back in 2009. He said sea levels would rise by 18 feet. The polar ice caps were going to melt. The polar bears would all be dying. And immediately after making this speech, someone went to the scientist that he supposedly quoted and said, "Did you say that? That sea levels would rise by 18 feet? He said, no. 18 inches would have been stretching it, more likely 1 or 2 inches. How in the world does a person of Al Gore's stature make predictions like this? And more recently, President Obama is pushing with all of his might for legislation, for climate change legislation. Now, since it hasn't been warming for 18 years, they just couldn't beat the global warming drum anymore. Everybody knew it wasn't true. I mean, even the dogs and the cats knew that it wasn't true. So instead of saying global warming, they suddenly switched to climate change. Climate change. What's that mean? What does that mean? Does it mean it's getting warmer? No, it's not doing that. Does it mean it's getting colder? Well, no, it's not doing that. Well, what does it mean then? And yet here we have President Obama occupying the highest office in the land, beating the drum of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask you a very serious question. Why? Why is the Pope doing this now? Why is President Obama doing this now? Are they marching to the beat of the same drummer? Well, the answer is yes, they are. What's behind all this? It's really very simple. A number of years ago, certain politicians decided that global warming was the cause that could scare people into surrendering the sovereignty of their nation to international law. The logic went like this. All right, we all have to breathe the same air. We all have to drink the same water. And since those are two commodities that don't stop at the border, they go everywhere, then the only way to control the things that are happening, the negative effects that threaten humanity, would be to create international law. That means we need an international climate treaty. Now, they tried to get it way back in 1992. They actually produced the Kyoto Treaty, and many of the nations of the world bought into it right then. The United States of America, fortunately, did not. The Kyoto Treaty required nations to reduce their carbon emissions by certain levels, by certain dates. But the U.S. stayed out, fortunately. However, with the election of President Obama, one of the first things he did in his first year was to make his way to Copenhagen. He went there to hopefully sign a deal. It was a climate change. It was a global warming meeting. I think that was back when they were still calling it global warming. That may have been when everything turned, because Copenhagen experienced the lowest temperatures, record low temperatures since records have been kept. I mean, 8 inches of snow. And here these people at this global warming conference, this worldwide global warming conference, when all the heads of state were converging for this historic turning point where we're going to sign this global warming agreement and we're going to change the world. The Kyoto Treaty had run its course. Now we're going to get a new agreement. All the nations are going to sign, and President Obama is leading the charge. So the one nation that stayed out, and the biggest polluter of all, supposedly, the United States of America, is now leading the charge to get this done. It's a new day. We have a new leader, Barack Obama, and we're going to adopt this global warming treaty. Well, the global warming demonstrators, with their signs, global warming, they're standing shivering to death in the cold in 8 inches of snow. I mean, it was a PR disaster. President Obama had to leave a day early in order to get home to Washington, D.C., because it was going to be 22 below, and they were predicting huge amounts of snow, and he wouldn't be able to get back to the White House if he didn't get back a day early. I mean, the whole thing fell apart. Now, here's what's really funny. They decided next year we better take this to a really warm, a guaranteed warm climate. So they scheduled it for Cancun in Mexico. And when they got down there, wouldn't you know it, record low temperatures in Cancun, while they were trying to tell everybody it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And everybody's having to wear jackets in Cancun. It was crazy. It's almost like God was playing with the thermostat, saying, Hey, listen. I control the weather. I always have controlled the weather. I always will control the weather. Nevertheless, okay, so here's the question. Why? Because President Obama and Pope Francis both believe the answer to the problems of the world is one world government. If they can get international treaties which obligate the world to meet certain quotas. Now, let me show you how this would work. They would say to you, all right, your carbon footprint should be no more than this. You produce no more carbon than this per year. And they supposedly would have a way to measure it by the car you drive, the house, the size of the house, the square footage of the house you live in, what it takes to heat that house, how many carbon emissions are going to be created by that house, and all the formula that they would put together, and everyone would have an allotted carbon footprint. Now you go over that, and now you've got to buy carbon credits from someone who doesn't exceed theirs, someone who does not own a car, somewhere in a third world country. Maybe they don't have a furnace in their house, they don't have any industry in their nation, very primitive. So now they are only using half of their carbon credits. So they're willing to sell their half they don't use to you. And it is expensive. I'm talking about thousands of dollars. And in the case of businesses, it could be millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars. So what's behind all this? Well, I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret. It's wealth redistribution. When you read the Pope's encyclical come Thursday, I guarantee you, you will read wealth redistribution, the central plank in international communist platform. Now, I'm not going to go easy today. I'm going to just tell the truth here today. President Obama, every chance he's gotten, has pushed wealth redistribution. And now this Pope has become the champion of wealth redistribution. Well, I've got something else to tell you about that, but I'm not going to tell you right now until we get back from this break. But why would President Obama and the Pope push wealth redistribution so much when they're both incredibly wealthy? I'll tell you more when we get back.